already running 7 minutes late.
Okay. Right.
Please.
My name is Professor Y.S.R. Murthy. I am the registrar of the OP Jindal Global University. I want to extend a warm welcome to all the distinguished participants, speakers, and in particular Mr. Surya for coming to the round table. And the OP Jindal Global University is a research-intensive university. We are strongly committed to knowledge creation, and from time to time we have been organizing seminars, workshops, distinguished public lectures on contemporary themes, and we have been making recommendations which influence the public policy. We have been working closely with the Law Commission of India and the Ministry of Commerce and various other bodies, and we recently did a major workshop on net neutrality, and the last week we had a major workshop on the role of Indian universities in the international rankings at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and so this effort is also a part of our university's efforts to take up burning issues of the day and make serious policy recommendations to the government and other agencies. We have slightly changed the schedule, keeping in view the request from the speakers to have sufficient time for discussion after they have spoken. And I request all speakers to keep their intervention to 10 minutes each to enable sufficient discussion at the end. And in your jute bag, you will find a set of materials put together by our Center for Intellectual Property and Technology Law. And I want to profusely thank the role played by Professor Arpan Banerjee and Professor Amit Jyoti for putting together this conference and also putting together these excellent materials. And I also want to thank and acknowledge the role played by Professor Rajkumar in organizing this event. And I now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, to give his remarks.
Thank you very much, Professor Murthy. Very good morning to all of you. It is indeed my proud privilege to welcome all of you to this important roundtable on piracy and its impact on the film industry. It was barely probably 5 weeks ago that Saravanan, or I should call him SURIYA, and I spoke about the idea of doing something. As we all know, the issue of piracy has been a larger concern for not only the film world, but also all of us who believe in the rule of law and the systematic and in many ways the institutionalized forms of piracy that has engulfed the world of innovation and creativity is the subject matter for today's discussion. I will say that this was hurriedly put together, and we are truly overwhelmed by the extraordinary presence of each one of you. You have made significant contributions to this issue, and you have all been working in your own capacities, either part of associations relating to producers or distributors or directors or artists. You have also contributed as in-house counsels and lawyers of production companies, entertainment companies. It's an extraordinary group which has come together. I would also like to particularly acknowledge the presence of Mr. George Baker, a distinguished member of Parliament of Lok Sabha, somebody who has also been a distinguished actor, somebody who is a film personality and who has grappled with these issues in a more as a part of his own professional growth and evolution. I also want to particularly recognize the presence of many of our faculty members, of course led by Professor Arpan Banerjee and Professor Amit, for putting together this discussion. I will just say one thing before I request my good friend Surya to give his remarks, that today we are in a world where change is possible through concerted action in a sustained manner. We have seen in our own country that a number of big issues have been addressed through collective consciousness on the basis of people coming together to address these issues. Today's effort is one of that, effort, and also I do believe that it will bring together many more people in the weeks and months and years to come to be part of a social consciousness that we are creating. We also believe that we need to engage with the policy-making bodies. We are very delighted that we have in the morning session one member of parliament who will take the message forward. We have people who have worked on these issues for a very long time. We're going to be we also have Dr. Narendra Sabarwal, who is the convener of the National IPR think tank and former Deputy Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization. He has, although he speaks in the afternoon, he has been kind enough to come and be present here in the course of the day. We have Dr. Ashwini Kumar, a very distinguished professor who was teaching here before, former Director of the Central Bureau of Investigation and former Governor of Nagaland, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University in Himachal Pradesh. We have all these people who have grappled in different capacities issues relating to piracy, and I'm delighted that they are all here. Lastly, I will say that we are here because of SURIYA. The reason I say that is he is, of course, very embarrassed about the fact that his photograph is there and we are calling him as chief guest and convener. But it is really because of his own personal commitment and dedication to the cause of eliminating piracy in India. People like him and others who are here, some of whom are here, their schedules are very unpredictable, but he has taken time to be here. He came in last evening, spent last night with us at my home here in campus, and he's spending the whole day today. It reflects a certain sense of commitment and dedication to the cause that he's espousing, and all I can say is that it's a privilege to have known him all these years. His humility and grace has been a great source of inspiration for me, and I am delighted that he's here. I also want to welcome our good friend Raj Shekhar. Raj Shekhar has been heading the production company that SURIYA had founded, and I'm happy that he is also here. So without further ado, now I call upon Saravanan Sivakumar, who is called in the movie world as SURIYA, to give his reflections.
Honorable delegates, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. This is one of the first conference I think I'm addressing. I'm sitting here as a chief guest, thanks to my dear friend Professor Raj. I have to go back and say how it all started. We both are schoolmates, college mates, and very, very proud of what Raj has been doing here. 2008, this must have been just a grass field, and here we have a global university, and just not a college, just not a deemed university, but a global university. I'm very, very proud and still in awe of what he's been doing. In Chennai, life is very different there, and to see the whole thing from Delhi, the whole perspective is very, very different. And happy, I have a very good friend who's gone through Harvard, Oxford, and now here as a founder, vice chancellor, and we're able to do this. So this all started with a WhatsApp group which started after Urta Punjab, and we got to know about what every industry is facing, and a lot of grievances was pouring in the WhatsApp group. And I had a personal experience with Raj and what he's able to do, and with his wonderful network which he's got in Delhi. So I had to share this with Raj, and I didn't realize he was in Hawaii, and it was like midnight, 12 o'clock. He immediately came up with this idea, Saranand, it has to be like the RTI, it has to be something like the income tax laws, where wherever you go, you're pulled down and there's no way out. So it has to be a policy, it has to be like a legislation, and let me do this, and that's how it all started. Thanks to Mr. Arpan, thanks to Amit Jodi, they all put the whole conference here today, and this is happening today. Thanks a lot, Raj, and without wasting time, losing time, let me start off with the question which is put to me. What does copyright mean to an artist? So again, it's my honor and privilege to attend this important roundtable conference on one of the crucial subjects which is affecting the growth of our film industry. Being an actor, producer, I've experienced the pain of piracy taking away our rightful revenues. I'm afraid the impact of piracy is only going to grow further if not attended immediately and brought under control. Thanks to my dear friends, Mr. Dhananjay and Mr. Rajkumar, for giving me a few datas. Thank you for helping me, sir, which I want to place before you to ponder upon. As per FICCI, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industries, Frames Report 2009, Indian film industry was of 8,930 crores. 2009, Indian film industry was 8,930 crores in size. The internet penetration in 2009 is supposed to be around 6 crores users in India. The number of films censored in 2009 was 1,288. The film piracy in 2009 in India was estimated by various research organizations at rupees 5,300 crores compared to the industry size of 8,000 crores against the revenue. What's the status today? The Indian film industry is of size 13,820 crore in 2015 as per FICCI's frame report, a growth of 55% in the last 6 years. The internet penetration as of December 2015 had crossed 40 crore users, a phenomenal growth of 570% in the last 6 years, compared to 6 crore users, now 40 crore. The number of films censored in 2015 was 2,100 in India. Compared to the above growth, with the size of piracy estimated as of 2015 by various research organizations, a whopping 18 crore, which is 240% growth, and a loss of the film industry compared to 2009, which was 5,300 crore. What is shocking is the size of the piracy industry. At 18,000 crore, there is much more than the official film industry size of 13,000 crore. What more do we need to know and understand the impact of piracy today on the film industry? Just to compare the Indian film industry and the China film industry, the Chinese film industry in 2009 was around 5,000 crore, which was much lower than our industry size at that time. That has now reached the size of 45,500 crore in 2015, a whopping 800% growth, which is more than thrice of our current size in the last 6 years. What China did right, what we failed to ensure. Where exactly are we losing our revenues? Why could not we achieve this kind of revenues that China film industry could achieve the last few years? Digital cinema, digital technology, which has become a boon to filmmakers to make films, has also become a boon to pirates. The advent of high-end mobile phones, huge internet penetration and digital cameras of handheld size have made it possible for the pirates to shoot easily a newly released film in a theater using camcorders, of course with the support of the theater operators in most cases, and upload immediately on one pirate using broadband internet who networks with as many pirates as possible to upload the film in their servers and through that route it to 1,000 links. They have their own distribution network much ahead of us. For instance, case of Kabali, the most anticipated film like Kabali with Mr. Rajnikant was made available early morning of the date of release through almost 1,000 links of pirates, despite the producer taking several initiatives, including the High Court order issuing an injunction against such legal uploadings of the film and giving instruction to the central government to act against piracy. He in fact came up with his own dialogue, say, "Yen vali, tani vali," which says like, my route is always different. He gave a video clipping saying like, "This is me and I'm here, catch me if you can." So that was, he was like really intimidating and challenging us, knowing we are going behind them. A conservative estimate by the anti-piracy team indicated that the film was downloaded and viewed by more than 1 million in just 3 days through these links. These downloads were converted into pirated DVDs, and other sources indicate that over 2.5 million pirated DVDs were already out in the market, and millions have copied the film through pen drives and mobile phones. Pirated new films are now available on the same day of the release. Most of us have witnessed it. A few cases like Urta Punjab, Great Grand Masti, and even Sultan, even before the release, the links were out. This is enabling the audience to watch at home through pirated DVDs or pirated online links easily, thus eating away more than 100% of the official revenue compared to the box office collections of the film industry. The most talked about film, just want to quote an example, the most talked about film Sultan has earned around 300 crore in the box office in India so far, which is just 2.5% of the population watching the film in theaters at an average ticket price of 100. Do you think it's only 3 crore people have watched this most talked about film in our country. Our estimate is nothing less than 7 crore or more people would have watched this film through pirated DVDs, pen drives, mobile phones, online links. Just imagine what would have been the revenue for the producer if people had watched it in theaters. A phenomenal 1000 crore at the box office for Sultan, which is the real potential of Indian films that has been killed by pirates. In this case, clearly 700 crore worth box office revenues were taken away by pirates who paid nothing to the copyright owner and walk away with huge revenues. In most cases, the money earned through such illegal means of piracy is used for antisocial and illegal activities including funding terrorism, which we must take notice of. So much so, for the first time in 2014, India was included in the International Piracy Watch List by the US government, a list of 4 countries where piracy is widespread. Such is the magnitude of the impact of piracy in our film industry. Indian film industry has several language industries. Among them, the most affected, I would personally say, the industry due to piracy are Hindi and Tamil. Reasonable measures were taken by the government of Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka to control piracy in their regional language films. However, even in these states, the piracy of another language film are widespread. The Tamil film industry is suffering heavily due to the piracy, and the recent estimate of loss due to piracy is over 1,000 crores every year, against a size of around 1,400 crore of the film industry. Compared to this, the loss in Telugu film industry is 380 crore. The Telugu film industry must really be appreciated for keeping the piracy under control, and thanks to the government for acting in time, which Tamil film industry is still unable to achieve so far. In a report titled The Effects of Piracy and Counterfeiting on India's Entertainment Industry by the US-based research organization, it was mentioned, piracy is not just a leaking bucket in India, it's a huge gaping hole in a bucket which is emptying the bucket rapidly. The report makes it clear that what is required is a strategy, and right holders need to work collectively to stop this evil. The Indian film industry has not been able to put together such holistic common program to fight piracy on a proactive basis along with the consumers, judiciary and policymakers. The report calls for a robust legal ecosystem from the state to protect the intellectual property rights of producers and filmmakers. The report ends by saying the punishment meted out to the offenders right now is mostly a slap on the wrist. The government needs to increase penalties and impose strong jail terms to deter the pirates from continuing with piracy and discourage them from being in that trade. For example, in India, the Indian Penalty and Copyright Act for piracy is a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 3 years with a fine of 50,000 rupees, and the second time offender a jail term of 1 year more and a fine of 1 lakh, where their revenue is somewhere else. Whereas in UK, the penalty is much severe. For the first time offender, it's 6 months and a fine up to £50,000. And the second time offender, it is 10 years and unlimited fine. Such must be the punishment, so the offenders think twice before acting. The task before us is not easy, but we can achieve it if we collectively work together and come out with a clearer action plan with implementation and agenda. We all need to raise our voices and make every authority hear it and make strong measures against piracy. As an actor, producer, I pray and expect that this august gathering of intellectuals, policymakers, to make use of this opportunity to spend more time determining measures to control the piracy than deliberating on the impact alone. The magnitude of piracy is known to everyone by now, and what we urgently need is a clearer action plan and recommendations to the central government on the changes required in the copyright law, legislation, and in its total implementation. I earnestly hope this will be achieved in today's conference and looking forward to the deliberations. Wishing everyone a great, wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saravanan, for that. At the outset, I just want to quickly mention that as we move forward in this, we also need to elevate the discourse from the revenue impact of piracy as a problem to a larger social impact which is in relation to issues surrounding dishonesty and integrity and creativity being captured, because we should be very conscious of the fact that there are so many matters for which people lose money. And I think as people who have assembled today here, for us to look at the problem of piracy, at least from a policy standpoint, there is far greater things at stake in relation to piracy than the hundreds and thousands of crores that people lose on account of that. And this is very important as a part of our discourse, because we will be able to bring a far greater group in relation to this imagination if we can move beyond the revenue impact of the issue. Now I call upon Professor Arpan Banerjee, Assistant Professor and Assistant Dean of the Law School, who heads our Center for Intellectual Property and Technology Law, to give his reflections. I request once again all the speakers to restrict their reflections within 10 minutes. And I have a bell here, which I am going to brutally press it to stop you from speaking. And we also have electrified things on your chair. We may use that option as well. Arpan.
Hope I don't go beyond 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajkumar. Well, let me begin by wishing everyone a good morning and thanking all the speakers for making it, and the audience members as well. And a big thanks to Mr. Surya, Professor Rajkumar, Professor Murthy, and Amit Jyoti for all their help. Now, over the next few minutes, I will just tell you very briefly about a research project that I worked on. You will find a draft version of my paper in the CD in your conference kit, but it's a draft version. The final version is coming out next month in a journal, and I have to make a few changes. So, at Jindal, I'm a part of a research center called the Center for Intellectual Property and Technology Law. We work collectively on certain projects, and we work individually on certain projects. My project was a project that I worked on individually. The way I came about to research on this is that I had received a fellowship from the World Intellectual Property Organization a few years ago, and I made a presentation on piracy, but I sort of needed some research funding, some research support to do a proper study on it. And that's when I came across an advertisement, not an advertisement, a call for research grants, a sort of competition by the Motion Picture Association of America. And I applied for that, and I got the grant. Now, my paper, of course, deals with a lot of legal issues concerning the industry, case law, statutes, and all of that. But I also try to look at the wider public discourse surrounding copyright and intellectual property. Now, one of the problems with the whole discourse about copyright is that it's, well, not unjustly placed under the umbrella of intellectual property. But intellectual property is a very wide term that encompasses patents, trademarks, and if you look at reporting in the media or parliamentary discussions, it's dominated by discussion on pharmaceutical patents and prices, which is a completely different issue from film piracy and copyright. And what's happening because of that is that a lot of lawmakers and policymakers tend to club these issues together. So if you read parliamentary debates, that's a big problem. I met Lohita's colleague at the Motion Picture Association, and he told me that when he goes to meet ministers and bureaucrats, they assume that copyright equals intellectual property equals big bad multinationals, big bad businesses imposing their laws on India. So if you look at the manifesto of the Communist Party of India, for example, the CPIM, it calls for the abolition of intellectual property laws that favor big business. But the problem is, if you look at the ground reality, that's not how the Communist Party has acted. For example, in the early 90s, it was Mr. Jyoti Basu who lobbied to extend the term of copyright in India by a further 10 years. And in Kerala, it was a communist government that enacted a strict anti-piracy law. So the Communist Party is responsible for enacting laws that go beyond our WTO obligations. So this is something that is not often appreciated in the academic discourse surrounding piracy. Also, there were whispers that when President Obama and Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Modi were having their meetings, there was a lot of criticism that the US would lobby India to change their pharmaceutical patent laws. That's why the IP think tank had happened. But when I filed an RTI RTI application to know about certain copyright issues that were discussed in the Modi-Obama meetings, my request was denied on grounds of national security. So I then filed a Freedom of Information application in the United States, which shared information with me. And I learned that the Indian government complained about some 400 websites to the US government that were disseminating pirated material. So this is very interesting, because if intellectual property means big bad Western businesses imposing their interests on us, how do we explain the fact that the Indian government is accusing the US government of pirating Indian films? And this is not unique to India. There are other developing countries which have sort of dual strategies. For example, one country I looked at was Cuba. Now, Cuba, like most developing countries, supports access to drugs and weak patent laws. But that's not how they behave when it comes to other intellectual property laws, because Cuba has filed a complaint against Australia at the World Trade Organization about plain packaging for tobacco, basically covering tobacco trademarks. Similarly, Iran, which is another country I looked at, is not even a member of the WTO. They're not even a member of the Berne Convention. But in Iran, there has been a movement to stop piracy, because Iran has a very globally acclaimed film industry, and they essentially lose out. So in my project, I of course looked at Bollywood, but I also went beyond Bollywood. I looked at the Bengal film industry, which is where I'm from, and even art house, underground filmmakers. I interviewed people like Mr. Soumitra Chatterjee, who's a family friend and a senior actor. I interviewed a first-time director called Anik Datta in Bengal, who directed one of the most critically and commercially successful Bengali films, which actually Mr. Baker acted in. I would encourage you to see it. It's called Bhuter Bhobishot. And they similarly articulated concerns on piracy. And one of the most interesting people I interviewed was a producer at a company called Overdose Films, which is an underground art house, production house. Their office is like a home. It's like a small apartment. That's where they make movies from. And they told me that piracy affects them more than big businesses, because a Star or a Sony can afford to withstand losses due to piracy, but they can't. These are people who invest their own savings in the business. But I also detected certain tensions within the industry. For example, Mr. Chatterjee was telling me that the older generations of actors were not entitled to performers' rights under Indian copyright law, and the law was enacted much later. So whereas today the young actors would be entitled to these rights, their actors were not entitled. And as we know, the law doesn't apply retrospectively. So he told me that even though he acted in many films like Satyajit Ray, he essentially didn't get those royalties because our law was not amended at the time. And part of this goes into the lack of organized lobbying, organized unions within the industry. So that's really it. It's a snapshot of my research paper. Do read the draft and send me your comments. I'd be very happy.
Thank you, Arpan. I will also add that one of the things that we intend to do as a part of the outcome document of this workshop is to pretty much delineate the kind of views and perspectives that are not only being shared here, but also the other issues that have come about in recent time to collectively create a sort of a position paper which will move to hopefully a draft legislation which will help us to engage with the lawmakers as well as the government in a more rigorous manner. So thank you, Arpan, for your reflections, and I hope you will continue to play a leadership role in that effort. Now I call upon Ms. Lohita Sujit, Director, Corporate Communications, Motion Picture Association, India office, to give her reflections.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to first apologize. We got stuck in a little bit of traffic at the airport, so I missed the initial discussions, but I want to thank SURIYA, this amazing institution. You know, I've come here a couple of times and we've been interacting with Arpan for a long time. So I think this whole initiative is going to be extremely constructive. And for me personally, I think this discourse is so important today because a combination of government, industry and academics is what I think will form the future of protecting IP and especially protecting copyright. I'm going to stick to my discussion because some of my good friends are here. There's Surinder Man and Raj. Raj is doing amazing work on enforcement. So I'm going to stick to my subject and talk about impact. I represent the Motion Picture Association, and essentially we represent 6 Hollywood studios in India, but we've been very fortunate that the local industry here has embraced our initiatives. The government has been extremely participative, and one of the major problems that we foresee as we protect content and copyright is the impact that technology brings. So as most of you all know, technology is the most amazing thing about, in this century. I cannot imagine what would have happened if we were not a connected world, but I think governments and every stakeholder here needs to understand that you need to be connected in a safe world. You need to be connected in a world where there are no barriers and where information flows freely but flows in a secure manner. We find that this is the biggest challenge at the same time. So technology is a boon and a bane in that sense for our industry, because without strong policies, without strong enforcement, and most importantly, because we're looking at a student population here and we don't want to be partial to you, without awareness and without access and affordability for content, you're looking at pretty much an impossible place to monetize your content. So the biggest impact therefore for us is the rogue websites. And when I mean rogue websites, we know by research and we know by observation that today websites are pretty much out there in a free-flowing world. There are all kinds of websites out there, but people don't understand how many of them are only interested in the business of distributing illegitimate or infringing content. And this is very important for us at this moment, because when you're looking at impact of piracy, I think the first difficulty from a consumer point of view is most of the consumers don't even know that these websites are real or unreal. And I have seen students, who are 12 years old and 15 years old, they can't really even tell a difference between a torrent site. I think most of you all would have read, and especially my industry friends here, that our challenge is no longer P2P, it's no longer torrent, it's video linking sites, it's video streaming sites, sites that want to replicate the real world, sites that want to behave like any other site like Dailymotion or YouTube, which we do not categorize as 90% pirate sites. So when you're looking at that gamut of things, what we also realized is a completely underground economy that's growing there. So on one hand, you have a website, consumers don't know it's obviously a rogue website, so you're confused. Governments find it difficult to track them. Most of them try to imitate legitimate P2P sharing sites. But on the streaming sites, let me tell you, a lot of things happen under the operations of the site. We're literally talking of an underground economy here. We're talking about a site that acquires content, obviously legitimately, and so like very well, most of that happens through camcording in cinemas. It happens on free access platforms where there are development apps where probably a camcorded video goes online. A lot of developers, because just they're passionate, they're not real pirates, but they all get together in reforming that platform. And one such example last year was Popcorn Times. I mean, we don't have that nightmare anymore, but that was one of the most challenging technology inventions, I would think. And if you're looking at video streaming sites in the future, we really, as governments and stakeholders here, need to analyze what is the actual impact that these guys create. So coming to that, behind these sites and what we would like to call an underground economy, you're talking about people doing millions and millions of dollars worth of transactions. And the reason for that is when you see a streaming site, it is supported by advertising. So obviously you're talking of high risk advertising. You're talking about ads which promote gambling, pornography. There's a lot of adult content out there, and that's how the site makes its revenue, because obviously it's illegitimate in the first sense. The second thing is, it lures a normal consumer to visit the site, obviously because of the bait of the movie, and at the same time it earns revenues through these high-risk advertising networks. Not only that, I think most of these sites are also interested and very much operating in the criminal economy. So every time you visit a rogue website, you could have ransomware that can get installed if your employees in a company are watching illegitimate content on that site. You could pretty much, as an individual, if you're a high net worth individual, you'll find that cookies are installed in your computer, and you'll suddenly find that your Citibank or your bank details or your ID theft is happening. So ransomware, ID theft, malware, so installation of malware for a lot of your personal information is also something that creates a huge impact from a social point of view. So we're very concerned about this whole economy that goes there. And just to give you statistics, according to a study in the US last year, a single illegitimate site made up to $70 million a year. Every time a site runs a malvertising campaign, so malvertising is just like an advertising campaign. So I want to put out an ad for Apple, and I want to target 1 million people. Malvertising sites do the same. It's just that it's malware getting installed on your site. So we are looking at up to $500 for running a malvertising campaign that targets 1,000 people. We are talking about sale of credit card information, obviously after you've installed malware, up to $135 per credit card. So, and I'm only talking about one site. So we are talking about millions and millions of sites. I think the efforts by you, by the Telangana Film Chamber, Star, cable piracy, we're talking of millions and millions of such sites. So we need to, I think, as stakeholders, look at the profits that are being earned absolutely illegally, and there's no benefit to the tax, to the exchequer, there's no benefit to the consumer, there's just no benefit for the industry. And I'd like to end by saying, and I'm open to questions, what are the immediate needs that or measures that as stakeholders we need to take to move from barriers? And now that the national IPR policy is out, how do we really get to stop talking about barriers all the time, every time we meet, to actually building an innovation economy? How do we really sensitize stakeholders around that? Thank you.
I'm so grateful to you for raising these issues in the manner that you did, and also to keeping within the time limit. So thank you very much, Ms. Sujit. Now I call upon Mr. George Baker, actor and member of Parliament, BJP Lok Sabha, and also to request him to reflect beyond the topic, also to think about what can we do to create a higher degree of awareness within the parliamentarians, and how do we elevate the discourse into a more serious conversation among the lawmakers.
Everybody, Surya, Mr. Rajkumar, everyone here, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me across. I will not go very much into details and statistics, because there will be enough available by the end of the day. What I will talk of is the rather utopian dream of honesty. That is the root cause of all types of piracy. That is one word. The next thing is, we keep on belching out the phrase freedom of expression. And that expression has gone to such an extent all over the world that there is no freedom to relieve or release a film privately. It's pirated before it reaches the halls. So if that freedom exists, then what freedom are we talking about? Besides the economics, which causes insurmountable damage. From the Bengal film industry, I think Mr. Banerjee will agree with me, there are endless number of crores of rupees that have been earned through piracy. Because people feel that in Bengali films there is a certain amount of, shall we say, intellectual level which is appreciated. And we have had some of the greatest filmmakers who are there. The unfortunate part is, when we think about things like this, we feel proud and say that Satyajit Ray today is right around the world. He has become a topic or a subject of education in film institutes and blah, blah, blah. But nobody bothers to think about the amount of viewing that has been done on various channels. I admire things like startup, make up and so on and so on and so on. But what I dislike is, as I said, the right which is provided to us by conscience, to be honest, that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. I remember as a child seeing some films from Hollywood. One was, I mean, these are the basic reason for piracy. A fistful of dollars. And the next one was a few dollars more. That is what everyone is trying to get, trying to earn. Irrespective of having the freedom of consideration, out there is no binding to be considerate. One cannot point fingers at government departments. As a member of the Censor Board, I also have found so many things taking place. Unfortunately, nothing happened in front of me. I was dying for an opportunity to be able to fathom as to how these prints were being duplicated and sent out. Now there are things. We have this, PDP that protected digital prints. I mean, if they are there at the CBFC stage, where we are certifying films, excellent. But then again, is there any legal step that can be taken to stop a scriptwriter or a story writer in trying to popularize his script and his story? He'll talk about it wherever he goes. He'll say, my film is under production, my story is under production. The biggest difficulty we have is keeping quiet. We make more noise than in letting people enjoying a little bit of quietude. Then there's digital cinema packages, key delivery messages. Yes, we should have a system of locking. Now, whatever inputs I get, if they're given to me on a hard copy, I promise to use these in the Parliament to help the film industry from being so badly attacked by a suffix to the word honesty, and that is dishonesty. As Indians, let us learn to inculcate honesty in everything we do, in whatever we say. Let us try it. There's no harm in failing. You probably will fail. But at least try to be honest. I don't think that's a big order. We can ask people to be honest. Then, of course, as I said, the most utopian dream is honesty. But when we talk of intellectual property rights, what are the ways and the action that can be taken to detect those people who are infringing on these rights? Is there any system? Is there any system you could suggest? Is there any system at all which we can utilize, not only in the question of intellectual property rights, but also in other spheres of activity? All other spheres of activity. Today, to do better, if we say a fistful of dollars, then let's refer to Russia and their team to the Olympics. To do a little better, they have all been under the stamp of drug influence. Is that a correct attitude? We do not have any attitudinal changes. Once you are branded, you are stranded. That's it. Nothing happens beyond that. And it becomes extremely difficult. No doubt what I'm saying may sound very pessimistic, but I'm optimistic about one thing. As Madam was saying about technology, I just jokingly asked a friend of mine, I said, how would you feel? I mean, science and technology have gone to such an extent that it's being used in medicine and in surgery also. Can you imagine your baby being delivered by a robot? My dear, I wonder what would happen to the lady. She'd probably die of fright. The baby may live, but she may not. So, I mean, technology has to be used judiciously. It has to be used judiciously. But who is going to lay down the guidelines? That is what my question is. Please give me the hard copies of whatever suggestions you have. I'd be very grateful to receive them. And as I promised earlier, I will definitely raise these points with the Information and Broadcasting Ministry as well as in Parliament. But there must be very concrete suggestions on how we can protect intellectual property rights, on how we can protect films. We can blame any amount of cable operators, we can blame any amount of cell phones in cinema halls, we can blame any amount of camcorders. The minute there is a restriction on camcorders and mobiles, then people will say this is dictatorship. And that is what is happening. Can you help the government to help you? I'd be extremely grateful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker, for your reflections. I also want to just briefly add that as a part of this effort, we intend to engage with the lawmakers, but also to develop a sort of a bipartisan consensus in which we engage with people across political parties. We have, as you know, artists who are serving in the parliament from different political parties, and I do believe that there will be greater degree of consensus among them, and I am grateful to you for your willingness to support us in this endeavor. Now I call upon Mr. Surinder Mann, Senior Vice President, Star India, to share his reflections. Once again, we are on schedule, and thank you for that.